It's time to wrap up with ASEAN highlights, and for this week our reporter Panu Wongcha-um takes a look at several issues that makes the headlines across the region. All the details in this report.
Swadee krab. On ASEAN Highlight this week, we take a look at the devastating flood in the Malay Peninsula, and then the effect of the tension between Thailand and Cambodia for people of both countries living along the border. And we wrap up things by taking a look at the prospect of Indonesian chairmanship of ASEAN under the gaze of the so-called Natalegawa doctrine. While the world focuses on the incredible flood situation in Queensland, Australia, Southeast Asia has suffered some flood problems of its own. In recent weeks, the flood situation in the Malay Peninsula has forced many locals to evacuate their homes both in Malaysia and Thailand. The Thai South has suffered from a series of floods due to the continuous heavy downpours, and since October 2010, flooding in Thailand's 12 southern provinces has created damages which, according to the Bank of Thailand, is estimated to cost around 35.37 billion baht, as well as the loss of revenue of 14.19 billion baht by local businesses. The degree of the damage can be reflected by the increase in prices of southern-originated commodities like rubber sheet and palm oil. The recent rising of the water levels in the Malay Peninsula has caused havoc in Malaysia's Kelantan, Pahang, Kedah, Perlis and Terengganu, forcing many locals to evacuate their homes. Some in Malaysia, like Jong Shan Fok of the New Straits Times, have called for a greater coordination between governments at the state and national level in dealing with flood, as well as in formulating the flood mitigation policy that include things like improved urban zoning regulations and construction standards, as well as better management of wetlands and mangrove areas by those concerned, something that authorities in Thailand should also take heed. Now, the political tension between Thailand and Cambodia in recent years have adversely impinged on the livelihood of people of both countries living along the Thai-Cambodian border. Our news team in Phnom Penh reports.
Chan Sawed of the Cambodian Human Rights and Development Association told ASEAN TV News that prior to the tension between Thailand and Cambodia, citizens of both countries living along the borders often venture across the national boundary to collect forest goods and make their living without being worried about getting arrested. But in the last 3 years, since political tension was raised, locals on both sides wander across the border at their own peril, risking of not only getting arrested, but also shot and killed by the security forces of both countries. Jiang Sok-kha, the Executive Director of Youth Resource Development Program, or YRDP, said that since 2008, many Cambodians living in towns adjacent to the Thai border have migrated to other towns deeper inside Cambodia due to their fear of escalating conflict between both sides.
នៅក្នុងស្ថានភាពនោះគឺប្រជាពលរដ្ឋមួយចំនួនធំដែលគាត់រស់នៅតាមដោយព្រំដែនហ្នឹងហើយដែលពីដើមឡើយគាត់មានអាសយដ្ឋាននៅតាមខេត្តផ្សេងៗហ្នឹងគាត់បានត្រៀមរៀបចំចាក់ចេញពីកន្លែងហ្នឹងដើម្បីវិលទៅទីកន្លែងកំណើតរបស់គាត់វិញ
The executive director of the YRDP also points out that the tension that could escalate further came from the nationalistic pride that the people of both countries possesses, as well as bad relations between the two governments, and these fractures undertone were demonstrated by the attention the case of the 7 Thais being detained by the Cambodian authorities received by the public of both countries. Mr. Jiang Sok-kha said that the improvement in relations between governments could lead to negotiation and the easing of the overall tension.
And to wrap things up this week, we take a look at the prospect of Indonesian chairmanship of ASEAN this year in the light of the so-called Natalegawa doctrine. the Natalegawa doctrine, a phrase recently coined by Ahmed Rizki Madhatila Umar of the Institute of International Studies at Gajah Mada University, who wrote in the Jakarta Post last week, referring to, of course, Indonesian foreign policy under the guidance of its incumbent foreign minister, Dr. Marty Natalegawa. At the Institute of Security and International Studies of Chulalongkorn University in Bangkok last month, the Indonesian foreign minister talked at length about his vision, particularly the way he sees the need for Indonesia and ASEAN to maintain what he calls dynamic equilibrium in the current international order.
And in this connection, we have introduced this notion of what we call a dynamic equilibrium for our region. We reject and we do not use the term balance of power for obvious reasons. As I said before, we do not believe that one country's rise must be artificially contained, must be seen as being a problem, a challenge against which countries must rally against and thus have a return of old-style Cold War type of atmosphere to our region. What we want to project in our region is this notion of equilibrium. Equilibrium means a state of predictability. We have, in terms of stability of relationships, especially the notion of common security, common prosperity, where the rise of one must not be seen as being at the cost of the other, and that there is a sense of shared interest in the common prosperity and development of our region. But most of all, this equilibrium is not only between countries, but it's also between issues. So we must ensure that there is equal attention not only on traditional security concerns, but there must also be an equilibrium of attention on other so-called new non-traditional threats as well.
Basically, Marty sees the multitude of possibilities for nations and regional groups like ASEAN to achieve their various goals and make their power felt in today's world, where cooperation on particular issues and interests transcend political allegiances, and where there's no clear hegemonic norm or polarity existed in the same way that it did during the Cold War. As Marty heralded the emergence of a new era, one had to put it in the context of the remarkable economic and political achievement that Indonesia has accomplished in the past decade. This achievement was marked by their inclusion into the G20, an exclusive club of developed countries, and recently, Marty has expressed that Indonesia would like to become a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council in the light of the calls for the Council to reform itself in order to become more representative. And in this context, the diplomacy of maintaining the dynamic equilibrium rather than seeking alignment reflects Indonesia's new weight in the international community. Does this new power extend to the diplomatic capability of other ASEAN countries? Only time will tell. As Jakarta seeks new roles in the world, the question remains on how far the Indonesians are willing to sacrifice their interests abroad for the community-building effort at home, or will they be able to do both at the same time without losing focus? Hopefully, through the Natalegawa doctrine, Indonesia will be able to establish itself through its exertion and establish an ASEAN community by its example. Well, that's it for this edition of ASEAN Highlight. And on behalf of ASEAN TV News team, have a lovely weekend and sawasdee krap.